despite the forecast warning of possible rain. Our company of 4 loaded into Nick's shabby Ford, and with enthusiasm and laughter set out for the lake outside of town. We had been preparing for the trip for a while. The weekend promised to be unforgettable, and at first, everything went exactly as planned. The sun was shining brightly, the thermometer showed a steady rise in temperature, and the smooth surface of the lake resembled a giant's mirror. "Who's up for a swim?" Nick called out, already stripping off his shirt. "Count me in," Isabella exclaimed, following suit. Laughter echoed across the water as they splashed into the lake, their joy infectious. Eva and I shared a smile before joining them, the cool water washing away the last remnants of city stress. Nick went to build a fire, and I gave the girls our fishing rods and lures, preparing to try our luck at catching fish. The fishing was slow. We only caught a couple salmon and crappie. Nick, smiling slyly, invited us to a makeshift table on a massive stump. He was a master of the grill, and we greedily devoured the hot cuts of meat, drinking beer with it all. "You're a real chef, man," Eva muttered with her mouth full. This caused laughter and high spirits. Our girlfriend, still chewing, looked at us, embarrassed but pleased. The day flew by unnoticed. By evening, the weather had taken a turn for the worse. The wind picked up, and the sky was covered with clouds. After a brief discussion, we decided to head home. Getting stuck in the mud out here wasn't on our agenda. Nick, our designated driver, got behind the wheel. The wind was howling, and just as we jumped into the car, a torrential downpour began. It was like the heavens had opened up all at once. Struggling to get onto the highway, Nick decisively pulled over to the side of the road. "Nope, not going any further. We'll wait out the storm and drive home in the morning," he said in a tone that brooked no argument. We weren't too upset. We turned on some music and watched the raindrops slide down the windows and drum on the roof. Without realizing it, we fell asleep. A loud knock on the hood of the car woke us up. It sounded like metal striking metal. Nick was instantly awake, turned on the headlights, and angrily jumped out of the car. "What the heck is that?" Nick whispered, startled. The headlights illuminated a tall figure in a raincoat, standing alone in the pouring rain. With a swift and calculated motion, he raised his weapon, a gleaming axe, and brought it down with terrifying force. The sickening sound of metal meeting flesh filled the air as Nick crumpled to the ground, a look of shock etched on his face. Horror rippled through us, freezing us in place as the gravity of the situation sank in. The man in the raincoat bent over the now lifeless Nick and struggled to pull out his weapon, which was embedded deep in the flesh. Moments ago, there were 4 of us. Now, the terrifying figure had issued a ticket to the afterlife to one of us and clearly wasn't planning to stop. He moved with the precision of a professional, like someone who had spent his life chopping down trees and people. I couldn't make out his face in the pitch-black night, especially with the rain and the hood obscuring his features. It was like a veil had lifted from our eyes, and we knew we had to act quickly if we didn't want to become part of this horrific scene. Almost simultaneously, we pulled the handles of the car doors, intending to leave our suddenly unsafe shelter. Isabella, sitting in the front passenger seat, was luckier. Her door swung open with ease, letting the cold fall air into the car. I was in the back with Eva, and my door was jammed. As I frantically tugged on the handle, precious time slipped away. The man in the cloak roared and seemed ready to chase after Isabella, who was already running towards the nearby forest. I smirked, knowing that there was no way this man would be able to catch up to our college's best runner. "Run, run," I whispered, looking out the fogged window. As if reading my thoughts, the stranger stopped. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled a knife from his belt, the blade slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Isabella's scream pierced the night as the knife found its mark, knocking her to the ground with a cry of pain. I let out a loud groan, desperately trying to open the hated car door. My despair reached a climax when I realized that I would be next. I, Jake Peterson, a first-year college student, a diligent student, and just a good guy. The door wouldn't budge, so Eva and I decided to get out through the front door. As we bent over the passenger seat, we made our way out onto the rain-soaked road. When I looked back, I saw the stranger angrily swinging an axe, trying to stamp Isabella into the ground. Blood was everywhere. The man's cloak had turned an eerie red. Mentally saying goodbye to Isabella, or what was left of her, I rushed to catch up with Eve. Remembering the man's impressive throwing skills, I ran in zigzags, zigzagging like a rabbit. The hostile outlines of the highway were disappearing behind Eva and me. We ran like we had never run before, and may have set a personal record in the process. Suddenly, my right foot plunged into a hole, nearly up to my ankle. My body kept moving forward, and the silence of the night was pierced by my scream and the sickening crunch. My leg had broken. The bone pushed against the skin, threatening to break through. The pain was so intense I nearly fainted, but gritting my teeth, I grabbed my leg and pulled it free from the hole. "You have to run. Eva, find help," I shouted, trying to hold back the wave of fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Tears streamed down Eva's cheeks as she hesitated, torn between staying with me and running to safety. "I can't leave you." With a final push, I urged Eva forward. "Go, Eva. Find help." Reluctantly, she nodded, her steps faltering for a moment before she turned and sprinted deeper into the forest. Gathering the remnants of my strength, I crawled towards the nearest bush, hoping to hide there until help arrived. Just as my legs disappeared into the thick underbrush, the figure in the blood-stained raincoat appeared on the path. I covered my mouth with my hands, barely breathing, afraid he would hear me. The man grunted and sniffed the air noisily. Then, looking around, he leaned down and examined the path. I don't know what he could see in the pitch dark, but apparently, his eyes worked like a cat's. Finally, he let out a sound of triumph and moved towards me. I convulsed in fear and crawled through the bushes, scraping my hands on the thorns and fallen pine needles. The stranger growled like a wolf and, waving his axe, began to scramble through the thicket, hungry for prey. The distance between us was rapidly closing, and I crawled with all my might, dragging my wounded leg behind me. Unexpectedly, the vegetation parted as if by magic, and I found myself in a small clearing. I tried to rise on my hands to face my death standing, but my arms sank into some foul-smelling muck, black as coal. The more I struggled, the more I sank into this swamp. Behind me, the footsteps of the relentless man grew louder, and I braced myself for a final showdown. The cloaked man stepped into the clearing and grinned menacingly when he saw me. His white teeth gleamed ominously in the darkness. He raised his axe and leaped toward me, ready to finish the job. By some miracle, the blade of the axe passed within a centimeter of my eyes like in slow motion. The murderous pursuer let out a puzzled sound and fell face first into the swamp. His massive body caused a huge wave of mud and filth to splash everywhere. A vortex formed under him, swallowing him almost entirely. I grabbed hold of a thin sapling, watching indifferently as the brute struggled to save himself. He resembled a giant fly trapped in a jar of jam. The lumberjack flailed and squirmed in the foul mire, not realizing that movement meant certain death for him. Meanwhile, the stranger sank deeper. His head was now barely above the surface, his frantic struggles growing weaker. I watched, transfixed, as the swamp claimed him, the mud bubbling and gurgling around him. There was a final, desperate gasp before he vanished entirely, swallowed by the earth. For a moment, silence descended on the swamp, broken only by the quiet drops of rain. I froze in place, shaking with fatigue and shock. Then a thick branch reached out from behind me. "Jake, come on." Eva's voice broke through the shroud of terror, bringing me back to reality. I grabbed the branch with my last strength, and Eva pulled me out with a scream. The rain had eased, but the night was still dark and cold. With Eva's help, I struggled to my feet, pain shooting up my leg, but adrenaline carried me forward. Together we staggered through the branches and mud. Finally, we reached the edge of the forest and saw the road. Collapsing on the gravel, we waved our arms frantically as the car approached. The car slowed down and stopped next to us. A middle-aged couple jumped out of the car, shock and concern on their faces. "Help, please," screamed Eva. They rushed over to us and the man gently lifted me into the back seat while the woman dialed 911. I felt the warmth of the blanket envelope me, and my vision began to blur. "Hang in there, baby," the woman said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You're going to be okay." As the sirens of the approaching ambulance grew louder, I finally allowed myself to relax. The adrenaline that had been keeping me awake had dried up, and fatigue had replaced it. My eyelids grew heavy, and I slipped into unconsciousness, knowing I was finally safe. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the soft murmur of nurses. My parents were there, their faces etched with worry and relief. Tears streamed down my mom's face as she hugged me gently. The police came by later to take my statement. I told them everything: the fishing trip, the rainstorm, the horrific encounter with the man in the raincoat. They promised to search the area and investigate, but part of me doubted they would find much. In the weeks that followed, I recovered physically, but the mental scars remained. I often woke up in a cold sweat, the memory of that night replaying in my mind. I never went back to that lake, and the sight of rain gear always sent a chill down my spine. But I didn't let fear rule me. Life is unpredictable and often cruel, but it also has moments of incredible beauty and kindness. And it was these moments that I decided to preserve, to honor the memory of my friends, and to remind myself that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light.